say that, and it's relevant to say that how far we've shifted this issue
Your Excellency, EU Ambassador, Mr. Coffey from the World Bank, representatives of the World Bank, SPC, and FAO, senior officials from senior finance and agricultural officials from the region, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Bula Vinaka, very good morning to you all, and those of you that are coming from around the region, welcome to Fiji. When I usually talk to trade officials, Suva and Nendi are their second home. I'm sure this is the case for finance and agricultural officials also. If not, you'll get to know Suva better in the course of your stay, I hope. But it's a pleasure to be here. The apologies on behalf of the Honorable Minister for Finance, who was not able to make it because Parliament is on. But I'll try to share some of the insights as to what goes into the decision making when finance and strategic planning considers agricultural projects, and also bring in some of the trade perspective also. I won't be able to tell you what's in for the agricultural sector for Fiji for the 2016 budget. I'll leave that to the Minister of Finance. But we support this important workshop, policy for Pacific agricultural policy planners. The key objective of this workshop, as we heard, is to introduce public expenditure reviews for the important sector of agriculture. And we all feel that this workshop is timely, relevant, as it's directly related to our responsibilities as policymakers and planners to deliver development gains to our people in the most effective and efficient manner. It is important to have a shared regional objective for the region towards the growth of our agricultural sector, because this sector is connected to sustainable livelihoods, increase in growth, and the reduction of poverty. In this regard, the Fijian government firmly believes that the agricultural sector has a key role to play in contributing and towards achieving these objectives, especially when the large portion of our population in the Pacific live in rural areas or farming communities. In Fiji, the sugar industry alone supports the livelihoods of 200,000 people, which is 25% of the Fijian population. But ladies and gentlemen, you would acknowledge that Fiji and the Pacific are going through a transformation. It is the fact that agriculture's contribution towards our GDPs has been declining over the last 10 years. This is because most of our economies in the region are industrializing and becoming service-oriented. The Fijian economy is predominantly made up of services, which represents 70% of our economy, followed by industries at 15%, while the agricultural sector represents 14% of our economy, and half of that is sugar. This is not necessarily a bad thing, because linkages to the manufacturing sector and the services sector would also enable growth in the agricultural sector. In absolute terms, it presents many opportunities. It also allows for the modernization and commercialization of agriculture, and for the sector to be part of domestic, regional, and global value chains. In terms of budgetary contribution, I saw the slide that was here earlier on. We can't seem to move away from this 2 to 3% of budgetary contribution. But the Fijian government over the last 4 years has increased its contribution to this sector. Total budgetary allocation has increased by 40% from a mere 51 million in 2012 to almost 75 million in 2015. And it should be noted that the increase has been attributed to the increase in capital expenditure in agriculture sector that are aimed at improving efficiency and increasing production. But we do note that both sugar and non-sugar combined provide approximately 3% of the national budget. But this is not it needs to be noted that this is not the only contribution. We have taken bold steps to also provide farmers with the necessary supporting infrastructure, and over 36% of the national budget, or approximately 1 billion, is allocated to capital expenditure, of which about 18%, or about 500 million, is for the improvement of access roads, bridges, and port infrastructure. This is important because it positively impacts this sector by linking commodities to the markets, both domestically and abroad. And we do acknowledge the fact, as was stated, that budgetary contribution to the agricultural sector in the region has not increased dramatically. And this is due to a number of factors. I think you'll go through your workshop and identify these factors, but most important is the lack of success of public projects. Even in Fiji, before the Bainimarama government came into power, implementation of large and expensive projects did not achieve the desired outcomes because these projects were not put through, one could say, through rigorous test of relevance, accountability, and most importantly, did not have to achieve measurable and quality targets. Now, we strongly believe, the government strongly believes, that we cannot afford to continue in this vein. As part of good governance and democracy, it is essential that governments are accountable. And the Fijian constitution also places economic, social, and moral obligation on the part of elected government to ensure that public expenditure is better targeted and achieves the intended impact. Therefore, before embarking on a model to effective public expenditure in agriculture, we should not lose sight of what has led to certain projects in agriculture not being successful. We should focus on how we can redress issues of accountability and effectiveness. The ministries of agriculture and finance must work more closely and methodically to examine systems and processes and address the weaknesses underpinning low success rate, poor returns on investments on public expenditure in agriculture. And some of this could be deficiencies in planning and implementation of agricultural public expenditure projects, in some cases leading to mismanagement of funds. Therefore, it is essential, and no one disagrees with this, that we need to build capacity in our agricultural ministries in terms of project planning and implementation. This needs to be addressed if we are to provide confidence for government and finance ministries to invest in the agricultural sector. The donors, I dare say, need the same level of confidence. And we saw that the ambassador just mentioned that they want to rely more on local mechanisms. So additionally, agricultural ministry cannot work in isolation. They need to work with agencies, for example, agencies responsible for trade, investment, tourism, rural and regional development. And this applies to agricultural development partners also. Essentially, projects in agriculture should be measured similarly to projects in any other sector, including the private sector. That is, what is the impact on the ground in terms of contributing to the country's sustainable economic growth. If we look at the Fijian experience, we have been experiencing high levels of growth, positive consecutive growth for the last 5 years, and in the past 3 years recording growth over 4%. The 2014 revised growth figures was revised at 5.3%, and the Minister for Finance in Parliament announced yesterday that Fiji is poised to have another above 5% growth in 2015. Our micro indicators are strong, and there's a strong investor and consumer confidence in the Fijian economy for this growth trajectory to be sustained in the medium to long term. However, our growth can be even higher if we unlock the potential of the agricultural sector, especially capitalizing on the synergies and the linkages with other sectors such as services and manufacturing. Ladies and gentlemen, you would note that Fiji has the 2020 agricultural sector policy agenda, which provides the basis for targeted intervention and assistance from government as well as donors. And there's other policy documents that donors and policy planners can refer to, such as the Fijian Trade Policy Framework and the soon to be concluded Fijian Tourism Development Plan. Each of those documents outlines the role agriculture sector plays in trade and tourism development. Any agricultural project should also take cognizance of government's overall vision and policies. And this is encapsulated in the soon to be released the 5-year and 20-year development plan, which the Finance and Strategic Ministry is working on. And this is important because projects are likely to fail if its implementers, its planners, and the development partners agencies are working in isolation or against government policies. Ladies and gentlemen, the public expenditure review in agriculture sector is a new concept for the Pacific. As a diagnostic instrument to evaluate public finances, it provides additional arsenal for policy planners to target resources effectively. It is vitally important that the public expenditure review model should contribute to measurable targets and objectives, especially on the impact of the project at national level. These indicators include the level of sustainable employment created, income generated, export markets tapped. In other words, how this project or a particular project has impacted on the farmers and ordinary citizens. Over the next few days, you as participants will get to learn about various analytical and diagnostic tools for undertaking agricultural public expenditure review. And this initiative is aimed at increasing the capacity of agricultural officials to put forward evidence-based justification for expenditure proposals to the Ministry of Finance. As policy planners, we need to budget and invest in projects that contribute to the sustainable growth and development objectives of our countries and region. And in turn, this requires better targeting of public expenditure in the agricultural sector if we are to achieve development objectives such as food and nutritional security, self-sufficiency, and local value addition in sectors such as tourism and processing. So I'd call on participants to take ownership of this initiative that has been developed and assess whether it adds value to our national processes. Whilst these diagnostic tools may have worked well in other regions, it needs to be tailor-made to our situation, which is why your participation and your contribution is vital. Ladies and gentlemen, with those few words, I wish you well in your deliberations. Vinaka Vakalemu, and thank you.